If you're covering the trial of Dr. Kankise Besuje or Mole Katanga in this case, what do? The most ethical way and easy way to do a story is to tell the story how it is.
Welcome to the Gender Tech Podcast, where we explore the intersection of science, gender, and technology. Today, we turn our focus to Uganda, our motherland, and unpack the future of journalism in the digital age and what it means for inclusion, access, and the representation in our media spaces. Today, I'm joined by Mr. Benson Ongom, the Bureau Chief at Next Media in Northern Uganda. He's a media consultant and an IT and media scholar. Together, we are going to explore how journalism in Uganda is evolving, the challenges it faces, and what the future could look like in an increasingly digital society. Mr. Benson, thank you so much for joining me on the Gender Tech Podcast, where we talk about issues revolving around science and technology. And being someone who is very experienced in media, you've worked in the traditional media and now we are in the era of digital media. I would say we start with the big picture, with the bigger picture. How do you think technology has changed the way journalists tell story, especially in the context of Uganda?
Well, thank you, Ruth, for hosting me today. I really appreciate, and I've been able to see your previous episodes and the clips. Amazing things that you're doing, especially with technology and gender. I think there's a real shift in the digital innovations and how we transmit it into storytelling as journalists. What I don't know is how everybody, or if everybody has been able to evolve with the innovations that we see within the digital spaces. Number one, are we affected? Are we telling our stories differently? Yes. And I'll speak for the media house that I work for. I think in the past 5 years or even 10 years, everybody would tune on TV to watch news at 9 p.m., 7 p.m., and so forth. I think that era is slowly getting out of how we used to do it. Right now, I think you can see the numbers on the socials. If you go to, for example, Next Media where I work, if you see our numbers on Twitter, you see our numbers on TikTok, you see our numbers on Instagram and so forth. And the stories that we tell. Right now, a journalist is going to go to a court to tell a story of maybe Katanga case. Of course, a journalist wants to file the Katanga case for 9 p.m., but it's a must that we have to do what we call social promos, those social clips, or even tell our digital stories. So you'll have to record yourself for about 45 seconds to a minute, and everything should be within that space of minutes or seconds. So that's for us to be able to establish it on our social platform. Again, by the time a traditional media person or a journalist files for 9 p.m. or for whatever time it is, the social spaces have already taken it. You know, there are a lot of digital journalists now. In the courtrooms, we have people with cameras and so forth. Again, if you look at print, I think how print is trying to do its thing as well. I was asking the students that were doing interns with me, and I was asking them, when was the last time you read a newspaper? Like normal newspaper. I think if you asked randomly, somebody will tell you maybe 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. Personally, I think I consume a lot of my news on X now.
People these days don't read newspapers.
Yeah, they don't, and that's the shift. If you speak to the people that sit in New Vision boardroom, and they tell you the sales they're making from newspaper, districts like Kitgum that used to receive maybe 100 pages, 100 copies a day, now only receive about 15 copies. So that is a real shift. And I think we are getting away from the physical papers. We are getting away from the normal TV times that we used to have. First of all, the attention span of our viewers or listeners or our audience has changed. You'll realize, even for people who make documentation, KFM has started doing, I think, even live. If they're doing presentation, they're doing it live. That is the shift. Nobody now wants things that are going to drag. And that is where we're headed. So media houses have to adopt to those changes as well. What is the attention span of our viewers, our listeners? What interests them? And I think also for the Ruth, I think also for the marketing or commercials as well. I think many companies now, before they give you an advertisement gig, they're looking at your number. They look at your number on social. They look at your number. They are not interested in how good you have presenters on air. What is your reach in terms of audience that listen or watch you?
I was also on TikTok a couple of days ago, and I was watching something that NRG had posted on their socials, and someone made a comment that these days we now listen to radio, I mean, using visual, using TikTok, so
Yeah.
so it sort of kept me thinking that okay. It's high time then the media or the broadcast media, up to their game, as opposed to you sitting in your studios and broadcasting that imagination that people are listening like those days. It's good to take your work online. And then also I saw something at Next Media, what is it called again, that radio station at NBS? Is it Next
Next
100?
radio.
What is it called?
Next radio.
Yeah, Next Radio. Yes. So Next Radio was broadcasting what was happening in their studios during prime news time, which I found very creative. It drives traffic across both platforms and keeps people interested in knowing what's happening in both spaces. So yes, I do agree. There is need for media houses to be creative and moving beyond the traditional ways of creating news content and embracing the digital aspect. See what Energy is doing. They're bringing popular people on their shows. They're driving traffic to their station. They're driving. Like the numbers are growing basically every day. They also hold concerts. So it's something that
So Ruth, just to add on what you're saying, I think the advertisers are looking for numbers. They don't care how you get the numbers. And that is how the audience
Yeah.
is working now. The advertisers are looking for numbers. Look at Kasuku, for example.
Yeah.
Kasuku used to work for KFM, as you know, and Dembe FM. So what happened to Kasuku? He goes ahead, start doing his YouTube things, and he has the numbers. So the numbers now rule the spaces that we have. And that is why we have influencers coming on board. What is influencers driving? They're driving at numbers. So the advertisers, any media house to be able to retain staffing, pay staffing, it still comes to money. And how do you get money? What is your reach? How will people appreciate you? If Stanbic Bank, for example, or Uganda Brewery is looking to advertise on a television station, what is your number? And it seems like numbers dictating the market now.
Yeah, I think that's also explains why the revenue models of the traditional media is going down. They are really struggling with keeping afloat revenue-wise, and for them to up their game and for them to still continue to staying relevant in the space, there is need for them to change strategy, move away from traditional, and like you can have a mix of two, both traditional and the digital aspect. Yeah. So let's say someone is, very many people look up to you, Mr. Benson. Let's say a young student out of university, or let's say out of A level and wants to join university and study journalism, and be like you, right? So what other skills, apart from learning the ethical aspects of reporting, what other skills would you want them to learn for them to keep afloat and for them to also continue being relevant in the digital age as an aspiring journalist, from your personal experience, of course?
So Ruth, let's set this aside. There are skills, and then there are things we don't need to get wrong. I think number one, it gets back to personality and consistency and your passion. I think I've seen very many talented people get wasted because of character. How able are you able to retain whatever you're doing in a long span of time, even when you're the most talented person? I think Ruth, I think for example, let me give an example. Maybe you could have had this experience as well. I think you have worked with some very talented people as well in life. But as you work with these people, you realize either their behaviors, their consistency, how they look at things, their passion, their drive. And for me, it gets down to the inner drive. As a journalist, most of the most successful journalists that we have in this country, and I'll mention you names as well, that people I really respect in this industry and their consistency. If you look at people like Solomon Serwanya, look like Simon Jala, Mildred Tuhaise, look at people like Raymond Mujuni. These are people that have been able to be very consistent in what they do as well. So the skill is another set of things that you need to have. The digital innovations and digital um, ways have come. How do I align myself with these digital innovations that have come? How do I adapt to some of these things as well? But at the end of the day, how do I remain consistent to tell that story? If you're telling an accountability story, how consistent are you over a period of time? I have always told journalists that, again, people call us very poor. I think we are somehow because how we're being paid. But I've also told people that if you want to grow value, especially in this journalism space, you have to work for it. Once you create your value up there, people will start appreciating you in response to the value you've been able to create. I don't think you can call Solomon Serwanya now to host a one-day event and you're going to pay him less than 2 million. I don't think you're going to call Canary now and pay him less than 2 million, the same as Raymond Mugudu. So you have to create that. There's skills, then there's personal attribute that you need to have as a person. But I agree with you, there's so many skills that you need to have at the moment. If you are in the space that I am in, you need to get your work right, especially with graphics, motion graphics, and so many things, because this now adds up. It's not only about your voice now speaking and voicing a story. No, how are you going to lay data? If I'm telling a story of Uganda Bureau of Statistics talking about poverty in Uganda, how am I going to lay it in graphics or text? How am I going to say it for somebody to understand, but also when somebody is watching, says this person has put in work? So there's a lot of things that I think young journalists and even the people that are in the practice needs to get right, because if you don't, you'll you'll be left behind.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with what you've just said. We've seen journalists diversifying. They are reporters, yes, but they're also hosting their own individual shows. We've seen journalists hosting their own individual X spaces, which is getting traction, which is also giving them numbers and keeping them still relevant in the journalism profession. We've seen journalists emceeing, going to MC at events, going to MC at political events, social events. That still keeps them in people's eyes. I think with the coming of the digital, with the influx of digital technology and the digital era, it's important for you to always put yourself in people's faces. That way, they keep remembering. And it's like they always say, keeping putting the face to the name. You're known as someone who reads news, someone who does APCD. But like if you diversify and get into another sort of fields, I think that would, grow your numbers. And with the influx of the digital technology, numbers really speak for you.
I think in 30 seconds, Ruth, I think media houses should allow their people also diversify and do things so long as it's not going to contradict with the policies that organizations do. For example, if I work with Next Media, which I am, if I do podcasts and it's uploaded on Afro Mobile, there's no crime in that. If I'm going to initiate my own podcast and innovations and so forth, but it's still aligned with the company policy, I think we need to do that. And I think because at the end of the day, media houses are looking for content. So how do you employ your team to be innovative in terms of content creation? So you adopt it even or within that media house or even outside the media house. Because if I'm opening my YouTube and I still say I'm a journalist, I work with NBS TV, I think I still have affiliation with NBS as well. So I think also media houses should not be rigid. They should allow journalists to explore some of the things that is coming out, especially in the digital spaces.
Okay. We've seen experiments like podcasts. Like right now we are on a podcast, and then we've seen things like newsletters and other funded stories. Which, according to you as Benson, which one do you think works better for a journalist who is looking at diversifying or having like I would say they use, people like using the term a gig, like having an extra chore to do, or like an extra task to do outside their normal 9 to 5.
Yeah, I
Which one
think
would
it really
help
depends.
them attract more numbers, according to you?
I think you need to look at your personal attribute as a person. Can you know that journalists who can write? I have I've worked with journalists who can write a story, but
Yeah.
they're very good at broadcast. When you give them a camera to do live links, they're amazing, but they can't write a lead of a TV story. So I think you need to look at yourself. What can you do better, and explore what you can do better. Are you a public speaker? If you are, how do you train yourself to do public speaking, do MCs, and do MCing and so other things? If you know you cannot, things like podcasts actually work. I've often said podcast is the future. We are not going to run away from this podcast. You'll have people just that will wake up in the morning just to listen to Ruth. I think we just need to be now very creative also within the podcast spaces. That do we need to record them like the way we are recording now, or do we need to have live sessions? If the live sessions, are they tabled, timetabled?
Yeah.
Which that I wake up every morning to listen to Ruth on gender tech? If it's so, because we just have to play around with our creativity and innovations within these things. But in my opinion, I think podcast is the thing, and it has a lot of um, it has a lot of things that gives back. At the end of the day, as I said earlier on, that radios are going to move to podcasts. Me and you grew up in the bigger part of Northern Uganda. You used to listen to things like Wilobo from Komakechi Walter and Jacqueline Akello. So who would want to
Yes.
miss Wilobo? So you can imagine if Komakechi Walter and Jacqueline Akello can reinvent Wilobo and do it on a digital space, how many people would want to listen to Komaketu Walter on a digital space like this? So I think we just need to be, because again, it's the future. As I said, TVs are moving into documentations or specializations, either do sports, music, tech, or other things. So I think you need to look at yourself deeply as a journalist. What better thing can you do? Do you write? Are you just a writer? Are you very good at writing? If you're very good at writing, how do you achieve financial gains through your writing and so forth?
Yes. That goes back to independent journalism, right? Yeah. Do
Yeah.
you think it's going to be like a threat to mainstream journalism if journalists decide to do their own thing away from their 9 to 5 work in maybe the different media houses? Let's say, for example, I work for Next Media, and I'm very you see, like what happened to Mr. Solomon. Solomon was, we used to be the face of NBS then, right? But like he diversified, went into being an ED at the institute. So is that going to be a threat to mainstream journalism? Are we going to lose the creme de la creme of journalists into these other mainstream, into these independent mediums?
I think it depends on the collaboration. I
Is
think
that
we
a
need to
threat?
collaborate. I don't think it's a
Yeah.
threat. And I don't think we should look at it as a threat. How can I co-opt gender tech into a space? Example, if you work with NBS and you're doing an amazing podcast, look at gender and technology as well. How do you adopt that and be part of it? Solomon still does what we call the hard talk, as you know, and still airs on NBS TV. He's our former staff as well. But there's a collaboration that his podcast still airs with us. I think that is what we need at the moment, because if not, we are going to die together. The mainstream media is going to die, and also USA. We need to allow and give ourselves space to collaborate, to work together. Can you imagine that if NBS or any other media house now wants to work on an investigative story with Solomon, you just have to partner and agree how best you can partner. If the revenues are going to come, how do you share the revenues? I think the future of media is partnership. And I have seen very many media personalities and companies partnering. And I think that is where we need now, because if not, we are going to be kicked out of the space, all of us. As you know, the funding in the media world now, every day, keeps getting tiny, keeps getting tiny. If you look at the financial books of Nation
Yeah.
Media, even Vision Group,
Yes.
I think every year it keeps getting tiny. So I think we need to collaborate more. We don't need to say this is a threat. We don't need to say this is an opportunity. Let's collaborate. Again, at the end of the day, we are all delivering news and information to the audience that we serve.
Nice. So let's try to take this a notch higher. There is this term that generally you journalists like talking about: freedom of expression, freedom of expression. So how do we strike the balance? How do you strike the balance between freedom of expression and accountability? Because journalists are the members of the fourth estate. They are supposed to give their opinions uncensored. But like, how do we hold them accountable if there is this clause or this thing at the back of their minds that my rights to my freedom to express myself as a journalist are being trampled on? Following what happened in the past elections.
Number one, Ruth, there's no absolute freedom. I have said it many times. There's nothing called absolute freedom in life. So whatever you do, there's nothing absolute freedom. One of the things I've been able to tell my colleagues, even some of the communication students who intern with me sometime, as a journalist, I'll give an example myself. One of the things I've practiced over time, I don't fear, but I respect. So these are two different things. I will respect you, but I still tell stories about you. I'll give you for example. From the part of the country where I come from, which is the Northern Uganda, I've been able to tell very difficult political stories. Yet even I know the political players don't talk among themselves. That's not my business. Mine is to tell the story. Mine is to interview a person A, a person X, whether they see themselves in the same clip. But what am I trying to achieve? So I think let's practice responsibility in a way that is factual. I think I'm going now to about 16 years in journalism. In my time in this space, one of the things I have told myself never to do is to blackmail people. I think deal with facts as it is. And when you have your facts, there's nobody and there's no story you can tell. You will tell each and every story. I'll give you an example. The other day I got a tip about, of course, now we know the speakership race between the players that you know, the Right Honorable Anita Mong, who is the current speaker, Norbert Mars coming to board. So I tweeted a story, which I got a tip, that one of the loser in Petelaro was trying to file a petition, and there are some people who are helping him to file a petition against Norbert Mao. And when I tweeted, it caused a lot of traffic, and people called me. You put that tweet down. I said, I'm not going to put it down. I got my source, gave me a fact, and I know how far that has gone. So I think what we just need to do as a journalist, based on facts, don't blackmail anybody for whatever reasons you're going to have. We have done stories, Ruth. Remember when I did an investigative story, I think on what we call lives in the hands of quacks, and I think that story won me an award as the best investigative story of the year. So when we did that story, there was a lot of calls that were coming in. I remember one of the person that the clinics that we were investigating in Gulu, the owner went to speak to my own father, and there was a lot of threat about it. And I kept saying, bring it on, because again, we have the facts. So one thing I'll just say it, and bluntly say it, there's no absolute freedom. So if you think you are in the media space and you're a journalist, you're supposed to write story about Ruth Acheng or a team Ruth, which is non-factual, you're going to be dealt with, and the law is going to catch up with you. Have your story, whether it's on who, just make sure you factual.
Yeah, I think that means that journalists should stay away from reporting PR stories, stories that keep them in the good books of their sources. But like stories that are factual, they just need to make sure that whatever they're saying is factual, it's well investigated, well researched, and they have evidence to back up in case the people implicated decide to go to the courts of law. Yeah. So right now we are in the era of AI, right? AI is everywhere. It's disorganizing very many people. It's going to replace journalists, or it's going to be more of a helpful assistant? Or maybe before you go to respond to that, have you used AI before as a journalist in doing your stories or articulations and whatnot?
Yeah, definitely yes. Definitely yes. I think anybody who see AI as a threat, you're going to be kicked out of this space. I was a judge in the It concluded yesterday. I was a judge in the inter-university innovation competition. It was happening in Gulu. It was organized by National Council for Education for 3 days. It was in Gulu. And we're seeing innovations of AI, integration into health, education, agriculture, and so forth. And luckily, when I was moving through the stalls, I think IU, the journalism school, and UCU, I think KIU as well, had a presentation, quite very innovative technology on how to use AI and the media space at the moment. I think we can't run away from it, but how best can we use it? For example, I challenged one of the students who had presented an application on, I think, on research work, some of the research works that have been done by academia. And it was quite a very interesting system. But one of the things that was not providing to me, because if you're developing an academic app and you're saying I can search for academic work that has been done by Professor Kitara or Professor Openjuru, it should be able to give me the source. So one of the things that I think we don't need to run away is that AI is going to be here and is not going anywhere. But one of the challenges that we face, Ruth, at the moment is I think many journalists still don't know how important AI integration into journalism can help them, or even how to use it. I dare you, go and call a training session in the upcountry districts of either Bushenyi, either in Tororo or in Gulo, wherever, and let journalists showcase you how they've integrated AI into their normal day-to-day work. It's going to be a challenge. At Next Media, that's a policy that we have. Even when you see Nile Post stories, there are stories that clearly the editors will say this was through the help of an AI tool, and it's not a problem so long as it's going to help you achieve your goal at the end of the day, because we are not going to run away from AI use in technology. It definitely is not going to. We're not going to run away from it.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think there are other journalists who just go overboard. You know, when you put a prompt on AI, you ask a question or whatnot, people just copy the exact response that AI has given them and then submit. You know, it's, I think for to make it sound, I mean, to make it not to sound very AI or very ChatGPT related, you should at least paraphrase, use different. There are actually a couple of several tools that you as a journalist can use to paraphrase to make it sound different, because if all of you are using the same tool and you're giving it the same prompt, you end up having the same responses, right?
That's a conversation we need to have. But also that takes us back to media houses and capacity development or training of their own journalists as well. How better do you want your journalists to be? One of the things I fail to commend, which I want to commend Ruth, I've been a political reporter. I really consider myself a political reporter. I think this country and media houses now have to specify if Ruth is just a gender reporter or a technology reporter. I think one of the biggest challenges we have, which the international medias don't have, you see the war between Israel and Iran, they'll bring a reporter that have reported on war. So I think we need to specify. There are legal reporters, there are people who report on court cases. They understand litigation, they understand prosecution, defense, and these languages. So I think one of the biggest things that we have right now, you want to throw Benson Ongom to cover a story of hunting Anyeri in Palabek somewhere. I am a political reporter, for God's sake. So I think that also is going to help us going forward.
I think that will also make it easier for people to report from informed points of view, because if I'm reporting on gender and then you take me to report on politics, I don't think I'm going to give it my best shot, or I don't think I'm going to do it justice, right? So when journalists specialize in certain fields, I think it makes them be accurate and good at articulating what they are reporting about, right?
Yeah. Definitely. And there's a lot of benefit to the viewer. You know, many things, Ruth, that we take for granted. One time we were discussing, I think, the NSSF issues when Richard Mutua had brought issues with NSSF, and they told us to get one of the member of parliament who can discuss NSSF and some of the financial history of NSSF. So when we brought that member of parliament on TV, he was literally speaking nothing. So at the end of the day, we all have our specialization, and that benefits a viewer or an audience. You want to have a conversation on how the economy is doing. Are you going to bring an artist, or are you going to bring an economist? And that is why TV, sometimes when we're discussing economics, we bring economists. Sometimes when we're discussing litigation, we bring lawyers. So I think that has to enlarge in the media space as well. If you throw a reporter who understands the law, we have an intern lawyer who is doing an intern with NBS at the moment. He has dreads. I hope you have seen it as well. He's one of the top lawyers from UCU, recent graduation. So when he's reporting, he understands the law, he understands the context, and I think that's where the future should go.
Well, thank you so much, Benson. Our time is fast spent, and as we come to the end of this conversation, finally, how can we as journalists stay ethical? I would say ethical, human-centered, and truly serve the communities that we report on, even if everything is getting into the digital space. With the influx of digital technology, how can we still remain ethical and passionate about our work as journalists?
So
Other factors constant.
I'll give you a very simple answer. Tell the story as it is. You don't have to go out, tell the story as it is. That's the most ethical way of doing a story. If, for example, let me give you one of the famous cases that I think the country is going through at the moment. If you're covering the trial of Dr. Kamkiza Besigye or Molekatanga in this case, what do? If you're reporting in the courtroom, are you going to manipulate your opinion on Besigye, or are you going to tell the story as it is? The story is there's a lead defense counsel called Martha Karua, Arias Lukwago, and the rest. There's a prosecution. They have submitted their submission as defense. There's a prosecution submission. Tell it as it is. Don't bring your opinion. One of the biggest challenges we have in the industry at the moment is people want to bring their opinion before news. You have to deal with the news. If we have said Nusav 1, Nusav 2, Nusav 3 has wasted over 4 billion or trillion shilling in Northern Uganda, and if you look at the impact of the Nusavs, you don't get the tangible impact. That is the story. Talk to the people that you're meant to talk about, but don't, because you are a very good friend to Minister Dr. Kenneth Omona, you know a couple of ministers and you know a couple of members of parliament, and you want to tell your own narrative of the story. The most ethical way and easy way to do a story is to tell the story how it is.
So I hope people, the journalists out there, are borrowing a leaf and have taken note of what you've just said. It's always not good to add spice onto a story to make it sell, because it will still come back and bite you. So stick to the ethics that you learned in school, the things that you've learned along your work as a journalist, and tell the story as it is, according to Benson. Any parting shots, Mr. Ongom, as we conclude?
Again, thank you, Ruth, for having me. This conversation, I thought it was not going to end anyway, but again, it has to come to an end. But I think whatever you're doing with these gender tech is an amazing thing. I think we just need to boost it higher. I think, on my perspective as a journalist who has been around for some time, I think this conversation is going to help a lot of people. I just pray that the people that have been in this space for a longer time don't get tired with telling their own experiences and guiding the younger generation. There's so many changes in the space. How do we deal with those changes, but also stay true as a journalist? I think that is the most important thing. But lastly, I think as a country, as media houses, we need to invest a little more on our industry. Some of the issues we have been able to have with bias reporting is again because of income. How much are you paying your reporter? Some reporters in some radios are paid 120 a month, and somebody has to rent, has a pregnant wife, and so forth. How do you deal with that at the end of the day? So I think we need to invest in the media rightly. I have gone to places, Ruth, you have been a journalist. The mentality of the general population, they think a journalist should not even drive a car. Very quite weird. They think you should not look smart.
Exactly.
Very quite weird thinking. So I think we also need to change our mindset, but this industry is not going anywhere because it's the fourth estate, and we all have to work towards making it better.
Yeah, you're actually right. It takes two to tango. You know, it's let's put our hands together, work with the different stakeholders, and push the industry forward ethically and doing things and reporting on stories the way they're supposed to be reported. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Benson Ongom, for taking time to speak with us as a well-seasoned journalist in the region to talk to us about the influx of technology and how it's shaping how people tell stories, how we consume stories, and how we're interacting with technology, especially the media practitioners. That brings us to the end of this episode of the Gender Tech Podcast. My name is Tim Ruth, your host. Follow us on across all the different social media platforms. We are on TikTok, we are on Instagram, we are on Facebook, we are on X. We also post on LinkedIn. Please interact with us, share, post, and spread the gospel of the Gender Tech Podcast. Thank you.